"You're spending your own money on that kid again, Anna. He's not your responsibility." The principal scolded, her voice sharp over the hum of the school hallway. Anna Carter didn't waver. She'd been paying for a boys' school, supplies for months, never asking for anything in return. She was a teacher in a small Indiana town, barely making ends meet. Until one day the Marines arrived to honor the boy's father, and everything changed. Who was this boy? Why did the Marines come? What's the kindest thing you've done for someone without expecting anything back? Let's find out. Welcome to True Quiet Stories. Let's uncover what happened in this story. If you love these stories, you can support the channel by liking and subscribing. In a small Indiana town, the air smells of chalk dust and autumn leaves. Anna Carter taught there. She was 42 years old. She worked as a third-grade teacher at Maplewood Elementary, a modest school on Oak Street that buzzed with the laughter of children. Anna's days were full. She taught lessons, graded papers, and wiped tears, her hands steady from years in the classroom. She smiled at her students even when her back ached from standing, even when the budget cuts loomed, even when the weight of her own struggles felt too heavy to bear. Her curly blonde hair was always pulled back in a loose bun, her cardigan worn but cozy, her eyes tired but warm, a warmth that came from a heart that had known struggle, that had known loss, that had known love, a heart that gave even when it had little to give, even when the town didn't give back, even when the days seemed to take more than they offered. Anna lived alone in a small apartment above a bakery, a quaint space with a sagging armchair, a shelf of children's books, and a window that overlooked the schoolyard, the sound of recess bells, a constant reminder of the things she couldn't fix, of the things she couldn't afford, of the things she couldn't change. Her father, who'd inspired her to teach, had passed away 7 years ago, a long battle with heart disease, leaving Anna to carry on his legacy alone, to keep her classroom bright alone, to hold on to his lessons alone, even in the silence, even in the dusk, even in the years that had passed since he was gone. Anna kept going. She worked hard, but she had a kind heart. She gave kindness. It was all she could afford. Anna's life in Cloverdale, Indiana, was a daily effort to nurture and endure. The town had seen better days, its streets lined with aging, homes, its factories shuttered after decades of decline, its people worn by years of hard work, years of dreams deferred, years of a life that seemed to take more than it gave. Cloverdale was a small community, just over 2,000 people, a place where everyone knew everyone, where Maplewood Elementary had been a fixture for generations, a school where children learned to read, shared dreams, and found a moment of joy, a place that Anna's mother had attended, that Anna had taught at for nearly 2 decades, that Anna fought to keep vibrant, even when the odds were against her, even when the supplies ran low, even when the town seemed to forget the school, to forget her family, to forget her. She grew up in Cloverdale, in a small house on Pine Lane, where her parents had raised her with love, with resilience, with the belief that teaching was the greatest gift you could give, that kindness was the greatest thing you could share, that hope was the greatest thing you could hold, even when the world was harsh, even when the nights were long, even when the struggles were heavy. Her father, Henry, had been a teacher, his hands steady as he wrote on chalkboards, his voice warm as he read stories, his laughter a bright spot in their small home. A laughter that Anna still heard even now, years after he was gone, years after heart disease took him, years after the classroom became her burden, her joy, her life. Her mother, Louise, had been a librarian, her smile a comfort to every reader, her hands quick as she shelved books, her faith a steady anchor for their family, her prayers a nightly ritual that Anna still whispered, even now, years after she was gone, years after cancer took her, years after the classroom became her responsibility, her memory, her purpose. They didn't have much money, their meals simple but hearty, casserole on Sundays, soup on weekdays, a rare treat of pie when the budget allowed. But they had each other, and that made their small house a haven, a place where Anna always felt safe, always felt loved, always felt inspired. Those memories were all Anna had left after her parents passed, a double loss that came in the span of 3 years, her father's heart disease, a slow fade that ended on a quiet spring morning, her mother's cancer, a sudden blow 2 winters later, leaving a void Anna couldn't fill. They'd been her foundation, her mentors, her cheerleaders, and their deaths in those lonely years shattered the life they'd built, leaving Anna with nothing but the classroom, the apartment, the silence that filled her days, her nights, her heart. She'd been 39 then, her hands still steady, her dreams still alive, but her world forever changed, her heart heavy with grief, with solitude, with a life that seemed to demand more than she could give, more than she could bear, more than she could hold. She threw herself into her work, teaching from morning to evening, her hand steady as she wrote on the board, her voice soft as she read to her students, her heart heavy with the weight of loss, with the weight of responsibility, with the weight of a school that was always struggling, a school that hadn't seen new supplies in years, a school that reminded her of everything she'd lost, everything she couldn't afford, everything she couldn't fix, even in the silence, even in the dusk, even in the years that had kept her apart. But Anna had a kind heart, a heart that still beat with the lessons her parents taught her, with the love they'd shared, with the hope she held for a better day, a hope that lived on in the small acts of kindness she offered, even now, even here, even in the classroom where no one saw her, where no one cared, where no one knew. She worked with care, taking pride in the lessons she taught, making sure every child felt seen, every lesson was clear, every smile was genuine, a quiet gift to the students who filled her days, even if they never understood, even if they never thanked her, even if they never saw the effort she put in, the love she poured into every day, the heart she gave to every child. The classroom at Maplewood Elementary was a burst of color that September morning, the walls lined with crayon drawings and alphabet charts, the air filled with the scent of chalk and fresh paper. Anna Carter stood at the front, her hand steady. As she wrote the day's math problems on the board, her voice soft but clear as she called her third graders to attention. The room buzzed with the energy of children, their laughter echoing through the open windows, the autumn breeze carrying the sound of rustling leaves from the schoolyard outside. Anna adjusted her cardigan, her fingers smudged with chalk dust, her heart heavy with the weight of a school budget that left her students wanting, a weight that reminded her of the empty supply closet, a weight that she couldn't escape, even in the laughter, even in the classroom, even in the moments that passed her by. She glanced at the back of the room, her eyes softening as she saw a small figure hunched over his desk, a boy who rarely spoke, a boy whose presence tugged at her heart, a boy whose need she understood, a need she felt, a need she couldn't ignore. She didn't know his full story, didn't know the depth of his struggles, didn't know the weight he carried, but she knew the look of a child who lacked, the look of a child who needed support, the look of a child who needed kindness, even if he didn't ask for it, even if he didn't expect it, even if he didn't believe he deserved it. Anna moved quietly, her steps gentle, as she placed a new pack of pencils and a notebook on his desk, her heart steady as she offered a smile, even if she didn't know who he truly was, even if she didn't know why, even if she didn't know what would come of it. The boy's name was Tommy Evans, though Anna only knew him as a quiet student in her class, didn't know the story behind those guarded eyes, didn't know the weight he carried, the weight of a loss that had taken everything, the weight of a life that had left him with little, the weight of a silence that had become his only companion, his only comfort, his only truth. Tommy was 9 years old, a child who lived with his struggling mother in a run-down trailer on the edge of Cloverdale, a boy whose father had been a Marine, a man who'd served in Afghanistan in 2010, who'd seen things he couldn't unsee, who'd done things he couldn't undo, who'd lost things he couldn't reclaim. Tommy's father, Captain Daniel Evans, had been a hero once, a man who'd led his unit through a deadly ambush in Helmand Province, saving his squad by drawing enemy fire, his own body riddled with shrapnel, his own heart scarred by the screams. Of the men he couldn't save, by the faces of the friends he'd lost, by the guilt that had followed him home, that had followed him through the years, that had followed him to his grave 4 years ago, where he now rested on the edges of a town that had forgotten him, on the edges of a world that had moved on without him, on the edges of a life that had left his son with nothing but the clothes on his back, a faded dog tag in his pocket, the memories in his mind, the silence in his heart. Daniel had lost everything after the war: his health, his peace, his family. The war thief that had taken more than he could ever hope to reclaim. He'd come home to Cloverdale in 2012, a different man than the one who'd left. His body, weakened by injuries, his smile gone. His heart heavier with the things he'd seen, the things he'd done, the things he couldn't undo. His wife, Tommy's mother, Rachel, had tried to help. Her gentle hands a comfort, her soft voice a lifeline, her love a beacon in the darkness that had consumed him, that had changed him, that had broken him in ways she couldn't fix, in ways he couldn't share, in ways they couldn't survive. But the PTSD was too much, the flashbacks too real, the guilt too heavy, the pain too strong. A force that pulled him under, that pulled him away, that pulled him apart until Daniel couldn't hold on anymore, until he passed away from a sudden aneurysm in 2021, leaving Rachel alone with Tommy, a son she loved but struggled to care for, a son who watched her work 2 jobs, a son who carried the weight of a father he barely remembered, the man he'd once been, the man he'd never be again. Tommy had been coming to school with nothing that year. His backpack, a tattered hand-me-down, his pencils, broken stubs, his clothes too small and worn thin, a lack that held the promise of learning, a lack that held the weight of his poverty, a lack that held the shame of his struggle, even in the silence, even in the classroom, even in the years that had kept him apart. He lived in a trailer with a leaking roof, a single bed he shared with his mother, a flickering lamp, their only light, a small box his only possession, a box that held the things that mattered most to him, the things that kept him going, the things that reminded him of the father he'd lost, even if he couldn't feel it anymore, even if he couldn't find it anymore, even if he couldn't live it anymore. Inside the box was a faded photo of his parents on their wedding day, their smiles bright against a sunny backdrop, a moment of joy frozen in time, a moment Tommy held on to, a moment that broke his heart, that kept him alive, that kept him hoping, even if he didn't know why, even if he didn't know how, even if he didn't know what for. There was also a letter his father wrote him before his last deployment, the paper creased, the ink smudged, but the words still legible. Words of love and pride that had kept him going through the darkest nights, words he read when the loneliness felt too heavy to bear. And there was his father's Navy Cross, a medal he'd been awarded for his bravery in Afghanistan, a medal Tommy couldn't bear to look at, a medal that felt like a mockery of the pain he carried, of the family he'd lost, of the boy he'd once been, a boy he'd lost, a boy he'd never be again. Anna didn't stop at one act of kindness that day, didn't hesitate, didn't let Tommy go without, even though the principal scolded her, even though her own funds were stretched thin, even though her own needs were unmet, a risk she understood, a risk she felt, a risk she couldn't ignore. For months she kept providing for him, her hands steady as she bought pencils, notebooks, and even a new backpack, her resolve firm as she slipped them into his desk, even if she didn't know his story, even if she didn't know his pain, even if she didn't know what would come of it. Tommy accepted in silence, his hands trembling as he held the new supplies, his eyes glistening with gratitude, his heart a little lighter, his burden a little less, his loneliness a little softer. Knowing someone cared, even if he didn't know why, even if he didn't expect it, even if he didn't believe he deserved it. The schoolyard at Maplewood Elementary was alive with the sounds of children that crisp October morning, the air filled with the rustle of leaves and the laughter of third graders racing across the playground during recess. Anna Carter stood, By the classroom door, her hands clasped around a cup of coffee, her eyes scanning the yard with a quiet pride, the kind of pride that came from seeing her students thrive, even if just for a moment, even if just in play, even if the world beyond. The schoolyard held struggles she couldn't shield them from. The sun filtered through the autumn trees, casting golden patches on the grass, the leaves a vibrant mix of red and orange that reminded Anna of the changing seasons, of the fleeting nature of time, of the hope that lingered even in the smallest moments. She adjusted her cardigan, her breath visible in the chilly air, her heart steady, despite the weight of a budget that left her classroom wanting. A weight she understood, a weight she felt, a weight she couldn't ignore. She glanced at Tommy Evans, the quiet boy in her class, playing alone near the swings, his new backpack slung over one shoulder, his small frame a testament to the resilience she'd seen grow over the months, a resilience she'd nurtured, a resilience she cherished, even in the silence, even in the playground, even in the moments that passed her by. Tommy's story hadn't gone unnoticed, not by everyone, not by those who saw beyond the worn clothes and the shy demeanor, not by those who knew the weight of a past unspoken, the power of a legacy unseen, the value of a child who carried a hero's name. In the school's small office sat a man who'd been watching Tommy with growing curiosity, a man who'd seen more than most, a man whose own life had been shaped by the kind of sacrifice Tommy's father embodied, a man whose heart stirred with a recognition that went deeper than the classroom could ever reach. His name was Michael Reed, a 48-year-old guidance counselor and a retired Marine, a man who'd served in Afghanistan alongside men like Tommy's father, who'd known heroes who'd faded into memory, who'd carried the same guilt, the same pain, the same silence that Daniel Evans had borne, a silence Michael recognized, a silence he understood, a silence he couldn't ignore. Michael had been at Maplewood for years, his hands steady as he counseled students, his eyes catching the quiet boy in Anna's class, the way Tommy's hands trembled when he spoke, the way his dog-tag necklace glinted under the fluorescent lights, the way the moment held a weight Michael couldn't ignore, a weight that spoke of honor, of sacrifice, of a hero's son forgotten, even in the laughter, even in the school, even in the years that had kept him apart. He'd approached Anna after a staff meeting, his voice steady but warm as he asked about the boy, about the supplies, about the kindness she'd given, about the struggles he'd sensed. Even if Anna knew little, even if she'd given without expecting, even if she'd never imagined what would come of it, even in the silence, even in the classroom, even in the years that had kept her apart. Michael didn't stop there, couldn't stop there, wouldn't stop there. Knowing Tommy's story deserved more. Knowing his father's sacrifice deserved more. Knowing a hero's legacy deserved more than a forgotten trailer on the edge of town, even in the laughter, even in the school, even in the years that had kept them apart. He drove to the local Marine recruiting office that evening, his heart heavy, with the weight of what he'd learned, with the weight of what he knew he had to do, with the weight of a story that deserved to be told, a story that deserved to be heard, a story that deserved to be honored, even if no one else saw, even if no one else cared, even if the world kept moving on without them. The office was a small building near the town square, its walls lined with posters of Marines in action, its desk cluttered with recruitment forms, its atmosphere charged with the quiet pride of service. Michael called his former squad leader, Colonel Sarah Bennett, a woman who'd served with Tommy's father, who'd known Marines like Daniel Evans, who'd seen the toll war took on those who fought it, who'd lived with the same guilt, the same pain, the same silence that Daniel had carried, a silence Sarah recognized, a silence she understood, a silence she couldn't ignore. Michael told her everything, his voice steady, as he spoke of Daniel's Navy Cross, of the squad he'd saved in Afghanistan, of the son who carried his name, of the teacher who'd given without knowing, even in the silence, even in the dusk, even in the years that had kept them apart. Sarah listened, her own heart stirring with the weight of a brother Marine's story, a story she'd heard echoes of in her own life, a story she knew needed to be honored, a story she couldn't let fade into the shadows of a small-town school. On. A bright Friday morning, the sound of boots echoed through the halls of Maplewood Elementary, a steady rhythm that broke the chatter of the school. That stopped Anna in her tracks as she prepared her classroom. That made her heart pound with unease and curiosity, a sound that spoke of something big, something unexpected, a sound that would change everything forever. For Anna, for Tommy, for the town of Cloverdale, for the world that would hear their story, that would see their honor, that would remember their sacrifice, their compassion, their humanity, in a way that would last, in a way that would matter, in a way that would echo, louder than words, louder than silence, louder than the lessons that had kept them apart. The classroom door swung open, and the children turned, their whispers falling silent, as a group of U.S. Marines in dress uniforms entered, their faces set with purpose, their movements deliberate, their presence a testament to a brotherhood that spanned generations, a brotherhood that had come to right a wrong, a brotherhood that had come to honor one of their own, even in the laughter, even in the school, even in the years that had kept them apart. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to True Quiet Stories for more untold tales of valor. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.